Before we start animating, we want to set up a camera because we need to know what the audience is going to see before we start animating. The perspective view that we have here is not suitable for rendering. It's the point of view of the user or of the designer here, the artist. And we also need to have a camera that represents what the audience sees. So we'll create a proper camera. Tap the space bar, go out to the 4 viewport layout, and then go to the Create menu and choose Cameras, Camera and Aim. Camera and Aim is a special type of camera in which the camera is always looking at an aim point. It has a target. So select that. And it's very, very small, and it's created at the origin. The camera is only 1 centimeter in size. And you can see it here in the perspective view. And if you press the F key, you will frame the selected objects. So there's our camera. Don't scale the camera to make its icon larger. If you do that, you'll have problems later if you've used something like, for example, an environmental effect with fog that's dependent on distance, or a depth of field effect that's dependent on distance. Any effect that depends on distance will change if you scale the camera from any value other than 1. Don't scale the camera, but instead adjust the attribute to change the icon size. Currently, both the camera and its aim point are selected. We want to select just the camera, and then open the attribute editor, Control A. And we've got the camera shape node attributes visible. Scroll down, and you'll see Object Display, and open that section up. And Locator Scale, that's the icon size. Set that to a value of about 20. And now the camera is large enough for us to see and manipulate relative to the other objects in the scene. Dolly back a bit. We can go into the top view here and dolly forward in a bit. Grab the Move tool and just move that camera back. And move it up. And you see as we move it around, it's always pointed towards its aim point. And if we want, we can move the aim point too. If you have trouble selecting things, you can use the outliner, which is a window that just lists all the objects in your scene. I'll close the attribute editor just so we don't have too much on the screen here. And go over to Window Outliner. And this is just a list of everything in our scene. And you'll see Camera 1 Group. You can open that up and you'll see there's the camera. Then there's also Camera 1 Aim. And now we can move that aim point around. Next, let's load the camera into a panel so we can see through the camera's lens. We do need to keep the top view here. We need the front view, but we don't necessarily need that side view, so we can sacrifice this panel. Go into the panel menu and choose Panels, Perspective, because we're loading a perspective camera. Camera 1. And now we can see through that camera's lens. And we can use the same controls to manipulate the camera as we do any camera. For example, the perspective or orthographic views. We can use Alt and middle mouse to track or move left, right. Alt and left mouse to tumble around the aim point. And Alt and right mouse to dolly forward and back. Alright, so let's set this up so that we can actually see the textures. Press the 6 key on the keyboard. And now we're ready to frame our shot. And we can use any of the methods that I've shown you here. We can use this third person method, or we can use the first person method with the keyboard shortcuts. In order to properly frame the shot, we need to make sure we know where the frame line is. And that's a bit tricky in Maya because the viewport's aspect ratio or shape is fluid. Aspect ratio is the width of an image divided by its height. Right now I've got a pretty wide aspect ratio here. Let me change the aspect ratio of the panels here by just resizing the channel box. I'll just make the channel box really wide. And now I've got a square aspect ratio here. And let's say I position the camera so that the ball is up in the corner like that. And when I render, what I see in the rendering is not going to correspond to what I see in the viewport here. So I'll select that camera view and then do a quick render. My render aspect ratio is a widescreen 16:9. And so we get a completely different result than we see in the viewport here. We need to know exactly what we're going to get when we render. To do that, we can enable a feature of the camera called the resolution gate. And that'll crop the viewport to show us exactly what's in the frame line and what's not. One way to get to that resolution gate is through the panel toolbar. Currently, I have the panel toolbar hidden. I've just hidden it for clarity's sake for the lesson. I can make it visible again with the keyboard shortcut, which is Control-Shift-M. And here's the panel toolbar. And the resolution gate is this icon here that looks like a little blue dot. Click on that. And now we see that parts of the frame are masked off. But because of the particular setup I have here on this particular computer, we're not seeing the entire frame. And parts of it are still getting chopped off up here. We need to go into the attributes for the camera and adjust the resolution gate in the attribute editor. We can do that by going to the View menu here and choosing Camera Attribute Editor. And now we're back to the camera shape node attributes. And here we want to open up display options. And here you'll see things like, here's the resolution gate. We can turn it on and off from here as well. We have the opacity of the mask, which is this area here. Move the attribute editor over. So I can make it more opaque. So now it's solid gray, or I can make it nearly transparent. And then we also have the color of the mask. I can make that black, for example. So now it's really clear what's going to render and what's not. Maybe I'll give it a little bit of transparency. Now the issue here with the image getting sort of cropped off by the interface here can be fixed with this Overscan attribute here. I'll set Overscan to a value of 1.5, and now we can actually see the frame line at the top and the bottom of the viewport here. Okay, so now we're really clear on what the framing is going to be, and we can go ahead and actually finalize this. One more thing I want to do is play around with the zoom lens on the camera. So we can see that more clearly, I'll select the camera, and in the perspective view, press the F key to frame that camera so we can get in really close on it to see it. We have a zoom control, and that's found in the attributes or in the channel box, and it's labeled focal length. And that in optics is the distance between the lens and the film or the sensor, and it's measured in millimeters. And mine is set up to emulate a single lens reflex still camera or a slide camera. If we increase the focal length here, we'll zoom in. Let's say I set the focal length to 50 millimeters, and now we've zoomed in. Or if I set it to 80 millimeters, we're zoomed in even more. If I give it a low value, then we'll zoom out. We'll have a wide angle shot. If I set it to 20 millimeters, then we've got a really wide angle. We can also adjust the focal length and any channel interactively. Select the name of the channel, in this case focal length, and click and drag the middle mouse button and drag it left to right, and we can interactively adjust that channel. So we can just dial in, just like we would with an ordinary zoom lens, how exactly we want to crop that frame. We can also dolly forward and back too. So that's different. Moving forward and back is different from changing the focal length. If we do the interactive adjustment here, once again with the middle mouse button, you can actually see the camera animate here to indicate that we've got a wide angle or we've got a telephoto shot or a long lens. You can set up your shot however you want. Just make sure that the ground plane encloses the entire frame of the shot and we don't see any blank areas and we don't see that background object either. Okay, now we're ready to save once again. File, increment, and save.